Hello, and welcome to another video by Liminal Spaces. Today I'm going to be talking about the second story in Harlan Ellison's edited Dangerous Visions anthology. And this story is by Robert Silverberg. Robert Silverberg and Harlan Ellison were actually friends before they became science fiction writers, which I didn't know. But because Harlan Ellison always introduces these writers before their stories, I got to learn a little bit about their relationship, which is one of the things that I absolutely love about this book, is how fun it is to read what Harlan Ellison has to say about his fellow sci-fi writers. So Robert Silverberg and Harlan Ellison were friends, and I believe neighbors in New York for a while. And Robert Silverberg wrote a novel, I think it was in 1956, and was awarded the Hugo for Best New Writer, and I think he was up against Harlan Ellison. At least that's the story he tells in the introduction to this story. Robert Silverberg, of course, we've come across on this channel before because he edited the Science Fiction Hall of Fame, which is the anthology I was reading before this one. So I was very interested in looking at Robert Silverberg from this direction as a writer instead of as an editor. Unfortunately, I was not a huge fan of this story. We'll get into the why of that in just a bit. But overall, it was kind of my least favorite I've read in quite a while out of these anthologies, which was surprising to me because I've been looking forward to reading Robert Silverberg's work, and I'm not going to judge him just off this story, but a lot of booktubers who I really respect, Moyd and the Outlaw Bookseller, speak very highly of Robert Silverberg, so I've collected a few of them here and there, and have really been looking forward to kind of seeing what kind of writer he is. And unfortunately, this was not a great introduction. The story. If you do not want to spoil this story, you could read it in 10 minutes, come back and continue watching. If not, I'm going to spoil the story in its entirety. The story is about a young astronaut who is killed in a space accident, and pieces of his body are left floating through space. And an alien species with much better technology than we humans possess picks up a couple pieces of his body. So in a weird way, this is kind of a first contact story. And they regenerate him. They basically recreate his body through their superior technology. And they make him exactly the same as his DNA showed that he was. But they go in and make a small change in his brain that gives him the power to broadcast other people's emotional responses, other people's emotions to these aliens. So they kind of turn him into a probe. They send him back to Earth, and his job is to send other people's emotions back to the aliens in order for them to study us. And the way that he does this is by going and visiting all three of his ex-wives. So he goes to visit his first ex-wife, and she has recently gotten over an addiction to a very terrible future drug. And she is laying in this weird bed thing that is reconstructing parts of her body. She says she's filling up with plastic in order to look normal again because of this drug that she took, but she's very proud of being off this drug, that she's kicked this addiction, and she expresses loneliness and the desire that he would come back into her life now that he's visited her and help her get back on her feet. And he says, of course I will. I will help you get back on your feet. And he goes out and he buys 3 doses of this drug, goes back to her and puts one of them in her hand, and all she has to do is crush it so that it will go into her bloodstream. And she's crying and begging him not to give her this dose of drug, but he gives it to her anyway, and she lets the drug back into her system, and he broadcasts the terror and sadness that she feels back to this alien species that's studying us through him. Next, he goes to another one of his ex-wives who is remarried and is living a very luxurious and rich life and is very happy with her life. And she has a pet from another planet that is this kind of living blanket. It's really, for me, the most interesting part of this entire story was this weird blanket pet. Like, I kind of want one. They're like the softest thing you'll ever touch, and they literally snuggle around you. But anyway, she loves this pet more than her husband, she says. It's the most important thing to her. And he says, "Can I hold the pet?" And he takes the pet and he kills the pet and broadcasts her devastation at him doing this back to the aliens that are studying us. And then he goes and sees his third wife. The pattern's been set. I know something terrible is going to happen. She's pregnant. She's worked over 2 years through an artificial insemination to get this child that she very, very much wants. And of course, trigger warning here for violence against women. He takes her and knees her in the stomach over and over again until he's sure that the baby he says he can tell the baby's not dead, but that it will be deformed enough through this violence perpetuated on its mother that it will have to be aborted, and all of her work is undone. By this point, I really wanted to throw the book down. I didn't want to finish this. It seemed like just almost a misogynist excuse for somebody to think back on all their exes and how they would like to hurt them. I didn't know if this was like a fantasy of Robert Silverberg or what was going on. I know that's not fair. Let me stop there for just a second. Writers have the ability to make up characters that aren't them. And that's probably, will give Robert Silverberg the benefit of the doubt. I just couldn't figure out like what the point was here. I get that first contact with aliens could be torturous and not fun. I just don't know why I'd want to read about that. And we're going to get into that a lot more. This is going to be a huge question throughout this video. But anyway, I did not put the book down. I kept reading. And he sent these emotions to the aliens, and the aliens decide that they are doing it wrong, that they don't need other people's emotions broadcast through him. They need to see the emotions of an actual earthling from them themselves in order to understand earthlings. So they call him back to them, and he has to go because he's basically been made to obey their commands. He goes back, meets up with them again, and it is revealed that when they gave him the ability to broadcast other people's emotions, then they took away his own empathy. So he wasn't able to feel anything that he was doing. So what they do is they remove that ability from him, at which point he is suddenly able to feel all the pain for what he's done to these three women. And he has to go back to Earth and live with that pain and anguish for his life. And all of his emotions are transmitted to the aliens so that they can study Earthlings through his personal pain. So I'm left with trying to figure out what Robert Silverberg was trying to say with this story. I was talking to my brother about it before I made this video on the phone, and he was talking about that there is a Star Trek episode from The Next Generation. I've seen all the Next Generations, but I do not remember this one directly, where the Enterprise is taking prisoners. They're transporting prisoners for some odd reason. Anyway, on one of the prisoners, they turn up his empathy. They notice his empathy is very low, and they're able to scientifically turn up his empathy, and he suddenly realizes and has remorse for what he has done, which seems similar to this story. But in the long run, it's not completely similar, because in this case, this isn't about somebody who had no empathy suddenly getting empathy. It's about somebody that had empathy having his empathy taken away and then suddenly given back to him. It makes it so that he doesn't have any agency in this story at all. None of this is his fault. He died. He was brought back to life and had his empathy taken from him, and then went and did terrible things, which the aliens were kind of forcing him to do so that he could transmit these sad feelings back to them so that they could study Earthlings. And then they realized, oh, it's better if we do it this way, gave him his empathy back, and he literally had to feel terrible for something that he had no control over doing before. So I'm left with this concept of why. This is like, for me, watching a horrible car crash just to see the tragedy of it. It's a story that is just hopeless tragedy without any meaning. And maybe I'm wrong there. Maybe you guys can get more meaning from the story. And if you did, please, please, please comment. I would love to hear other concepts about this story, especially if you liked it. I would love to hear your thoughts on this story. So after reading this story, I had to try and think about stories that I would like that were similar to this. And I came up with the movie Annihilation. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. It's absolutely incredible. But it is also a movie that doesn't have a lot of hope. And I'm not going to spoil anything with this movie. But in thinking about it and talking about it with my brother, I started to realize that the reason that I enjoyed Annihilation so much, even though it was so hopeless, was because, number one, there was a huge mystery there. And number two, it was beautiful. Like, it was terrifying, but it was beautiful. The way things, DNA started to change. I think about the tree that was in the form of a human, and you don't know if it grew like a human or if a human became a tree. I think they do tell you in the movie, but I'm not going to get into it. It was hopeless, yes, but it was beautiful and full of mystery, and we had to learn that mystery to see how hopeless it was. This story didn't have any of that beauty. The prose were straightforward. There was nothing flowery or interesting about the prose whatsoever. It was just the story of a man forced to commit awful crimes against his will and then be forced to deal with those. Another thing I thought about is Harlan Ellison's I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream. So this one, boy, this is a harrowing read. When I read this, probably like, I read it when I was a teenager, and then I read it about a year back again. And this story is crazy because it's hopeless. I mean, it is by definition hopeless, and it sticks with you. But I liked this one a lot. I feel like this is an incredible piece of writing. And I think that it's because of, first off, Harlan Ellison's prose is absolutely incredible. And second, it is about AI and about what can happen if computers are given too much free reign. I'm sure I'll do a video on this, so I don't want to talk about it too much. But it had an overall point that I feel made sense. And I guess this one is that first contact with aliens can be absolutely devastating. And that's true. That makes sense. So I can get why people would like this the same way I kind of like I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream, because it might be a darker look at what first contact could actually be like. And that makes sense to me. But just me as a writer, or as a reader, I couldn't find my way into this one. It was very hard for me to read because it just seemed to be 3 snapshots of violence against people that didn't deserve violence against them. And that does happen in the world. And some people like to stare directly into that abyss. I myself don't as much. I am going to read more Silverberg in the future because so many people have said such good things about him. But yeah, this one was not my favorite. I'm not going to rank it. I obviously didn't like it. But I would love to hear what you guys thought of it, especially if you loved it. Please, in the comments, tell me your Robert Silverberg stories. Tell me specifically what you liked about this one if you liked it, or if you didn't like it, tell me what you didn't like about it. The next story in Dangerous Visions that I'll be reading and making a video of, if you'd like to follow along, is by Frederick Pohl, and it is called The Day After the Day the Martians Came. I've heard about Frederick Pohl, and I'm never read him. Very much looking forward to. I know that some other science fiction booktubers have brought up ones they really liked. I think Moy did a whole thing on Gateway, his novel Gateway. So I'm looking forward to finally becoming acquainted with the work of Frederick Pohl. Thank you so much for watching till the end. If you like this video, please click like. And if you like this kind of content, go ahead and subscribe. We're going to be doing a lot more of this kind of content in the future. Thank you so much for watching.